Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first video of the fourth marking period. Can't believe it's the fourth marking period. Already time is flying. Hair's getting longer. I'm sure yours is too. Maybe by the last video in the fourth marking period, I'll have like an afro or like a ponytail or something. That'd be fun. Miss you guys as always, though. Third marking period grades are in. If you guys have any questions about any of that stuff, as always, let me know. A lot of you guys did really well in the third marking period, so let's keep it up in the fourth. I think somebody did the math. I'm not sure if it's right or not. I think we only have, because of the A-Day, B-Day, we have less than 20 classes together. So it's crazy. I mean, it seems like, we have a whole marking period. There's still, the end of April. We have all of May and then most of June. But, with this AB schedule, time's really flying. So we only have like under 20 classes left together, which is crazy. So we're roughly going to spend about half on the Great War, on World War I, and the other half on World War II. So we'll split it up. We'll cover as much information as we can without trying to overwhelm you guys like always. But today we're going to do a little bit of World War I. Okay. So anyway, guys, like I said, I miss you. Keep doing well. Keep checking your grades. Stay up on all your stuff. Today's going to be a beautiful day. The weather's turning around a little bit. Things seem to be looking up. So just keep taking one day at a time and keep doing your thing. Okay. So again, we have World War I today. So I'm just going to do a quick rewind, like always. So just because of time constraints, there's a section this year that we're not going to get to cover this year as much as I would like to. We're actually really going to just skip over it today very briefly. And it's the time period that bridges the gap between what we just learned, which we just took a test on, which is the Industrial Revolution, and World War I. So obviously there's a lot of things that are going to happen between the late 1700s, early 1800s, and World War I, right? So this is just going to be kind of the main big event that happens between there that I'm going to go over for about 5 minutes. That will bridge the gap between the two. Usually we'd spend like a month on it, but just for this year with time constraints, like I said, we don't really have that time. So it's called imperialism. And it's a big topic. So let's think back to, the Revolutionary or Industrial Revolution, almost Revolutionary War. Think back to the Industrial Revolution and what was going on, right? It's an expansion of resources. It's the world becoming more efficient. It's more factories. It's all these different things. And these countries in Europe, France, Germany, they have all these factories in England and even America. They need supplies. They need materials. They need raw materials. They need energy sources. And a lot of the things that they're using, right? Coal, all the different sources of power that they're using, there's only a limited amount of them in specific areas. So now what they start to do during this time called imperialism is they seek out of their countries. So let's say you're France. You don't just want the resources in your country anymore, coal, iron, all that, those different resources. You want to reach out now and see, okay, I have all these resources to use to help, power my factories, power my machines. What else is out there? So instead of, these European countries invading each other to take each other's resources, goods, items, all those types of things, they look to the massive country, really resourceful country of Africa. So this age of imperialism is this really, really time where as the world's improving, these European, these advanced countries, they look outward and they look to Africa and say, wow, they have so many natural resources. They have so many things that we can use, and we can use them for our factories to keep improving. So what they do during this age of imperialism is pretty much, as you guys can see in these two cartoons here, these two political cartoons, they pretty much split up Africa. And you might sit here and think, well, wait a minute. Don't Africans have a say in this? Who gives Europeans the right to come in Africa, take their land, take their property, take their resources, and go home and bring it to them? But there was something called social Darwinism at this time period, named after a guy named Charles Darwin, where it's basically this belief that Europeans had that they were kind of better than other people. And also they believed in something called survival of the fittest. And they felt, well, if if we're strong enough to take your land and your resources, we're going to do it. And there's nothing you can do to stop us. So there was this belief, general belief amongst Europeans that they were, like I said, they were better, they were stronger. So they were going to go into Africa and basically invade them and divide it up and split it up. You could see this little political cartoon on the left here. You could see British grab bag, Germany grab bag. So they're all going in there. And literally, it's almost like I picture that game that I used to play, Hungry Hungry Hippos. I don't know if you guys are too young for that game, where you would just like get as much as you can. You would be the hippo and you would go in and just grab, and then whoever had the most won at the end. It was kind of like that, where all these advanced European countries were basically dividing the entire continent of Africa. And then you could see the political cartoon here on the right, the mad scramble for Africa. You see Great Britain involved, Italy, Portugal, Spain, France, Belgium, and they're all just, these countries are just desperately, invading them and taking them over. Okay. So I found a stat here as well, and I'm just going to show you this map as well of Africa. How many countries does Africa have in it? Take a stab. It's got 54 countries. It's a lot of countries. So Africa is huge. Okay. So the stat that I found was that in the year 1880, so right kind of at the end of the Industrial Revolution, in 1880, only 10% of Africa was controlled by Europe. So that's 1 out of every 10 countries, if you will. Or that's, at this time, there wasn't 54 countries, but there was still a lot of countries, a lot of different nations and groups. Only 10% in 1880. So that's 1 out of every 10 countries of Africa was controlled by Europe. Okay. By the start of World War I in 1914, you see this map here, European imperialism, 1914, only 2 countries in Africa were still free. Over 95% of Africa by 1914, about 35 years later, was free. Okay. And that is the result of this big word that we've just been discussing called imperialism. Okay. Imperialism is when, it's very simple, the definition of imperialism. It's when a stronger nation or group takes over and invades a weaker group. Okay. So that's what's going on, basically, to bridge the gap between the Industrial Revolution and between World War I, is that, as you see, all these different countries are literally scrambling for Africa, and they're grabbing their resources and they're bringing them home and they're using them in their factories to try to improve, life in their own place, right? With really generally no feelings for, the African countries. We can go on and on about imperialism. Like I said, we usually talk about the positive effects of it, how actually the Europeans brought schooling and advanced technology, and they brought, they basically advanced Africa as they were imperializing it. But the negative effects is that if you're an African and you're living in any of these countries, any of these nations, your rights and your sovereignty is being taken away. So lots of positive, lots of negatives. There's the guy Charles Darwin that we discussed. And this is just a look of the natural resources in Africa, and there's so many of them. So you might be asking, like, why Africa? Why can't they go to like Asia, or why can't they invade America? Well, one, Africa was a little bit behind on the time, so they weren't as technologically advanced, so they couldn't defend themselves from attacks or from imperialism, from the direct control, indirect control. But look at all these great, amazing resources that fill the massive continent of Africa. Oil is a big one. Although oil wasn't used tremendously during the Industrial Revolution, there still is a lot of oil. There's gas, coal, copper, bauxite, gold, diamond, timber, uranium. I mean, Africa is just full of natural resources, sources of energy, ways that Europeans can take advantage of them. Okay. And then last but not least here, these are just some uses of the different energy sources, what you can use them for. Okay, now how is this possible? How is it possible? Why is imperialism possible? Why was it so simple for Belgium, Italy, Spain, Germany, France, all these countries to just go in Africa, take their stuff, and get out? right? Well, we've talked a lot. Well, try and answer that question for yourselves. Why was it so easy for them? And you could have said a lot of things. Obviously, technology is a big one. Technology, not only in the sense of transportation and travel and trains that can connect towns to cities, and steamboats that can go navigate quickly through water or up and down streams. Africa has a lot of rivers and rapids and things like that. So they would need boats and that type of traveling technology, but also military technology. There was a gun that was invented at this time, the first machine gun in the late 1800s, called the Maxim machine gun. It's this big like turret gun that you just basically put in the ground. It's almost like it's like an MG. It's like one of those really big machine guns. So the Europeans had that on their side, while the Africans didn't have as many advanced weapons. So they had, the Europeans had transportation, they had technology, they had, what else did they have on their side? Oh, they had the fact that a lot of the African countries were also not unified. So a lot of the African countries also couldn't unite together to fight back against Europe. Now, if all these countries in Africa were united and together, and they put together an effort to fight back against the European powers, they probably would have had a better shot. But the fact that they constantly were fighting each other, the different African countries and tribes and groups, there was internal conflict. So when Europe comes and puts extra pressure on those conflicts, it becomes very easy for them to imperialize. Also, there was a medical breakthrough, so other medical technology now as well, called quinine, which was basically a remedy for malaria. Malaria was a disease that frequented Africa quite a bit at the time. Europeans had never been exposed to it, but now they had this new vaccine, a new medicine that came out called quinine, where the Europeans could take it and they could go into Africa and they could be immune from the disease. Almost like how they're trying to come up with a vaccine for the coronavirus today. So that's just a little bit to bridge the gap for you guys as we move forward here to World War I. Okay, so if you guys have any questions about that, I'll ask you guys a couple. Let me know, but I tried right there to cover like a month or like 3 weeks of school with imperialism into like just a couple minutes. Okay, so you could see the transition. You could see industrial revolutions going on. The world's growing. Those countries need resources. How do they get their resources? They imperialize. They go take over Africa. They're fighting for land. Although a lot of things are going to lead to World War I, we're definitely going to get into them, but that's kind of a little preview for World War I. We're going to start to see competition now amongst countries, amongst really all of the great superpowers of the world. Okay, so here we go. The Great War, World War I, had a lot of nicknames. They called it, like I said, the Great War at the time, because think about it. They had no idea that a Second World War was coming. So during the time period that World War I was fought, they called it the Great War. It actually didn't get its name World War I until basically the start. I think it was the Time magazine or one of the magazines that called it World War I. Once World War II started, they called the Great War World War I. They called it the war to end all wars. It's such a fascinating topic because it was the biggest war that the world has ever seen. It was just war on a mass scale. It was a total war as well, meaning that it wasn't just a war that was being fought between armies and navies and militaries. It was a war that truly involved almost every single citizen in the world. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, children and the elderly and people not involved in the army were fighting. But a total war means that their lives, women, children, anybody that wasn't necessarily fighting in the war, their lives were greatly affected. I mean, World War I basically pitted every single superpower in the world, dozens and dozens of countries, all coming together. And it's almost like they created like two super teams. It was almost like an all-star game. It was almost like the NBA all-star game where it's, the East versus West, or the MLB where it's the American League versus the National League. It was like these two just ginormous superpowers of all the best countries, strongest countries in the world coming together and fighting. And we'll get into the reasons for why they fought. But World War I truly was a great war. And the word great obviously meaning not in a necessarily positive light, great meaning in, the size of it. And like we said, it was all the major players in the war. And World War One was really such a breakthrough of war because there had been peace in Europe for, a decently long time. There was always small conflicts that arose, but there was a good amount of peace in Europe between really the Napoleonic Wars, the 1800s and World War One. Like I said, there were certainly conflicts in between, but think about what's happened since, call it the 1800s and 1800 and 1914. What's changed in Europe? What did we just learn about with the Industrial Revolution? This big outbreak of technology, of resources. And think about this. The Industrial Revolution was factories making things, items, more efficiently. Okay. Now in World War One, a lot of those factories, a lot of the machinery, a lot of the technology, a lot of the ideas that were so advanced no longer went into creating, whatever it was that these factories were creating. Now all that brain power, technology, thoughts were put into killing. So now it wasn't making, linens and, whatever the factories made. It wasn't, pumping out threads or pumping out, clothing or whatever at a mass scale quickly. No, now it was pumping out those factories, pumping out, bombs and pumping out, munitions and ammo and guns, pumping out all of those things on a mass scale instead. So the war, like I said, was just absolutely enormous. Literally war on a mass industrial type of scale. If I can show you. So what's this called? I'm sure we've all at least been introduced to it. This becomes a very popular style of war during World War One. Very, very brutal, very disgusting. We're going to get a lot more into this, but this is called trench warfare. So this is a type of warfare where, two sides would camp out against each other, and it was brutal. They would use gas against each other. Just really, really brutal, really, really disgusting, bad stuff. And like I said earlier as well, World War One was also a war. It was so great, might have you, because it was the first World War. It was really the first for a lot of different things. Well, first off, what's one thing you notice in this picture that we might have never seen before in war? You might have said airplanes. Right? So this is the first war where airplanes are used, not necessarily for bombing in the beginning, but they're used for recon. They're used for traveling. Eventually they become bombers where they're dropping bombs out of the sky. Now you also see a cannon in this picture. What you might not see that was also used in this war for the first time on a mass, larger scale were tanks as well. Tanks were used. So we're going to see that. We're going to see new uniforms, more advanced uniforms with a little bit more protection and better helmets. We're going to see advanced planning and massive movements of troops all throughout Europe. We're going to talk about something called the Gallipoli campaign, and we're going to talk about battles at sea. I mean, again, I can't reiterate enough that World War One was just war, just on this huge, huge scale. And again, it was supposed to be the war to end all wars. How did that work out? Not so well. So we'll talk about the treaty also eventually. The treaty wasn't necessarily the best and the strongest and the best written treaty, because eventually it somewhat helps to lead to a second world war, as we know. But yeah, these are just a couple more pictures for you. So World War One. And it's also one of the first wars that was highly photographed. So we get to see, although they're not beautiful color pictures, you could see again, there's trench warfare there. That's just an open battlefield. And then one more thing as well, that America really didn't want to get involved. America doesn't get involved until 1917, when there's only 2 years left in the war. They didn't know how long the war was going to last at that point. But the war had already been raging in Europe for a little bit over 2 years, almost 3 years at this point. But a really big thing about World War One is that America truly emerges from this war as a massive superpower. They were already on the up and up. They were advanced. They were becoming more advanced. They were becoming more dominant as a world force, as a world power. But I think, in my opinion, at least, World War One really solidified America as, we don't want to mess with them. They are, they are really a highly respected power in the world. Okay. So here's going to be the last thing that we do today. You guys are going to use the online textbook, and you're going to answer. You're not going to do these in your notebook today. You're going to do these in on the Google form or on the Microsoft form today. But you're going to go to page 840, and you're going to respond to these two questions using the scenario. So let's read the two questions first. So question one. So let me just preface this. We're going to discuss a lot during World War One about allies, about teams. Okay. World War One was a time where it was almost like every single country jumped in to protect their allies. And it was like, yeah, you want to join? I got your back. You want to join? I got your back. Oh, you're friends with him and he's fighting? I'll join you. Oh, you're friends with that country. You're allies with that country. I got your back. I got your back. And it was almost like a snowball effect where it wasn't just, it starts off as such a small conflict just between two groups. But then all of their allies and all of their I guess you could say, trees and networks tie in, and it almost like drags everyone. I hate to compare it to like a street fight or something, but it's almost like there's two people on the street and they're like, oh, all right, they're fighting. And instead of everybody stepping back and just letting those two duke it out and fight, it was almost like, all right, well, I got my friend over here. You're going to jump in. And then before you know it, it's massive people on it. It's just a brawl in the street. So I think that's a pretty good, thought comparison that we can make. So I want to discuss with you guys a little bit about allies, and these are your two questions here. So throw my pen around. What else is new? So first question, should countries always support their allies no matter what? And explain your thinking. So let's think about that question, and you're going to read the scenario first, but these are just the two questions. Should countries always support their allies no matter what? And I want you to think about this question. What situations might you support an ally country? What situations might you not support an ally country? Would you just jump into war with them no matter what? Would you not? What is your, what this is called like foreign policy, right? What are ways that you might deal with, other nations and their doings, okay? Your second question is, what might be long-term consequences of refusing to help an ally, okay? And remember, allies usually have shared interests. Allies are usually like friends. They have they're allies for some sort of a reason. So what might be a consequence if you say, no, I'm not backing you up in this war. I'm not doing that. I'm not, helping you here, okay? So those are our two questions. And then there's our map. And this will be the page that you guys are going to be reading. So it's 840 in your book. You can see 840 down here, 841. For some reason, it's 960 on the scroll thing here. I sound real smart on the scroll thing. Okay, so let's zoom in here. And here is the scenario or situation you're going to read. So I'll actually read it for you. Why not? And this is a good intro. So should you always support an ally? World War I has begun. You are the leader of a European country and must decide what to do. Your nation is one of several that have agreed to support each other in the event of war. Some of your allies have joined the fight. You oppose the thought of war and fear that joining will lead to even more lives lost. Yet, you believe in being loyal to your allies. You also worry that your rivals want to conquer all of Europe, and if you don't join the war now, your country may end up having to defend itself. So this situation here is a true situation that European leaders, even leaders of other countries, even leaders of other countries around the world, not just in Europe, had to face. So again, there's your scenario. And we'll hop back over here to the PowerPoint. And then, sorry about that little delay there. And then these are your two questions here. So with that, knowing the situation, once again, should countries always support their allies no matter what? And then what might be some possible consequences that might deal with it? Okay, let me just make sure I didn't miss anything here. No, I think we got it, guys. I think we're good to go for the day. Yeah. Okay, yeah. One last thing that I got from my notes here. Just realize that too. Whatever decision that you make here for your dude, I remember this is wide open. There's no necessarily right or wrong answer. I just want you to defend your answer and explain and give some details as to why. Just remember that as the leader of a nation, your decision affects everybody, right? It affects all of your citizens. Remember, World War I is a total war. It's a war that involves everybody. So you saying, yeah, we'll join war. We'll join up, sure. It doesn't just affect you and your troops and your army. It's going to affect your whole country. It's going to affect your economy. It's going to affect the way that your industry works. It's going to affect families and food rations possibly. So, there's a lot of positive and negative implications to your decision. So let's just think about it a little bit, right? And guys, I think that is it. This will be the last slide I show you. In the next class, we're going to talk about the causes of the war, specific things that caused it. But check out this map of the world. Amazing, truly breathtaking, absolutely amazing. Let's look at the title of it, Countries Involved in World War I. And then the next thing we should look at is map key. So there's two sides. We have the Allies, and then we have the Central Powers. And then obviously you have your neutral countries that are not involved. Let's take a look here. Orange represents allies. So the United States is on there, and Canada. Some of the main countries we've discussed in Europe. This would be Germany. This would be France. United Kingdom. You have Portugal involved. You have Brazil. You have Russia. So that's a lot of nations. Even Australia. You got to do something crazy to get Australia involved in war there as well. India. So the amount of allies involved in this war, tremendous, right? And the Central Powers, which you might look at it and say, wow, there's not that much green on this map. But those green nations, as we'll go forward to mention soon. So this would be Germany, this would be Austria-Hungary, this would be Bulgaria, parts of what was used to be called the Ottoman Empire. These were some very, very powerful, strong nations. They make up the Central Powers. So it just shows you, Great War, total war, how many different groups of people were involved. And remember that World War I is not just going to be their armies and navies and militaries involved. It's going to be every single citizen in every single one of these either green or orange countries getting involved with their lives affected somehow. Okay? So guys, I'm going to post this video up. Hope you have an amazing, awesome, what's today, Tuesday? I can't keep track anymore. Have an amazing, awesome Tuesday. Get these questions done. Next class will be another video. And to preview, we'll talk about some of the different causes of the war. I have a lot of pictures, a lot of really cool things to show you, alliance systems, and I have a lot of really interesting things coming up for us. So, good luck with this. If you have any questions, reach out, guys. Keep working hard. Miss you, and have a great day. Okay, bye, guys.